Now, have a think about this. If we had a function, what would 1 over that function look like? It's a really complicated question, actually. There's a lot going on there, and we need to really think about it. I'll give you an example. Supposing that the original function, f of x, had a 0 somewhere, a root, right? It had a point where it cut the x-axis just like that. Well, what would 1 over x look like, right? What would 1 over f of x look like? If I was going to draw it, well, if f of x was 0 at that point, the reciprocal function would give us y equals 1 over 0. Well, that's problematic. There isn't going to be an answer for that. Well, what's actually going to happen is that's going to mean that if I was to try and draw this reciprocal function at that same value of x, I'd have to have an asymptote. So zeros are going to have to go to asymptotes. The behavior of a function is going to get really weird, and so we're going to need to think really carefully about what happens to a reciprocal function. Okay, now this is going to summarize this for us nicely. I'm going to talk through some of these points just to make sure we have complete clarity here. So when y equals 1 over f of x is graphed from the original function, there's some things. As I've mentioned, zeros of the original are going to turn into vertical asymptotes. And likewise, if it had a vertical asymptote on f of x, well, now those are going to become zeros. So that's nice. They work together. If you had a maximum value, well, now it's going to become a minimum value. And if you had a minimum value, that's going to become a maximum value. We'll look at an example of how that's going to work in just a moment if you're not sure what that means. However, some things are going to stay the same. So, for example, if we have values for which f of x, the original, is positive, well, 1 over a positive number is still a positive number. It's still going to be positive. And the same for when it's negative. When f of x is negative, 1 over a negative number is still a negative number. It isn't going to change that. So the whole graph isn't going to flip. That is not true. The final point is, when f of x is tending towards 0, well, 1 over 0 is infinity. So 1 over that is going to tend towards either plus or minus infinity. And vice versa, if the original graph was tending towards minus or plus infinity, well, 1 over that is going to be 0. Okay, let's take a look at an example. I think that's probably the best way to think about this. It's very, very tricky to understand. Okay, let's redraw perhaps as well this one to make sure we understand. So we've got a function. There it is. In fact, let's not redraw. Let's just try and do it on that original. Okay, let's try and draw on top of it what is the reciprocal function going to look like. Right, so I'm going to attempt to draw y equals 1 over f of x. Step 1. Well, I would go with the asymptotes, because I know at -7 and 1, we're going to have asymptotes on this reciprocal function, because that's when the original function is 0, and 1 over 0 simply can't be done. So I'm going to draw in some nice asymptote lines. There we go. Okay. Next thing to worry about. Right, what else? Well, let's think about that minimum point, -3, -2. What's going to happen to that? Well, if you remember the rules, it's now going to be a maximum point. And, of course, if I put in, let's just jump in and make sure we understand this. I know that f of -3 is -2, of course, right? But if I want to do 1 over f of -3, well, that's going to be 1 over -2. Well, that's going to be my maximum point. It's going to be something here, right? This is the point, -3 minus a half now, right? That's where it's gone to. It's flipped over. And we know that it's a maximum, and we know we've got asymptote lines. So the only possibility is this, look. Oh, excuse me. we are going to have some kind of discontinuous function that is tending towards negative infinity as x tends towards -7 and 1. There we go. Okay, right. And other things we can see. Well, on the right-hand side, as we were tending towards 0, we are now tending towards a sort of positive infinity. What's going to happen here is we're going to have a asymptote line there, look, because as we were tending towards, look up here, that positive infinity, we're now tending towards 0, right? Look, there we go, we're tending towards 0. It's the same there. And of course, it's going to be exactly the same on the left-hand side. As we were tending towards positive infinity in that kind of direction, we're now tending towards 0. The result of the graph is going to be something like this. There we go. So that red function there is my best effort at drawing you a reciprocal function. Okay, I hope that makes sense, and you can access the questions on this now.